Now from Archaeology News Northeast, the latest archaeology news and interviews from around the UK. This is Tales from the Trowel with Jackie and Sarah.
We are here in Hamsterley Church, in St James's Church, with Ady Davis, organiser of the Hamsterley Big Dig. So, Ady, can you tell us in your own words why you decided to take on this mammoth task?
Being in St James's is quite relevant because it all started here. We set up the Friends of St James's Church a while ago to start trying to look after the fabric of this Grade 1 listed church. And in preparation for doing things to try and sort of look after the masonry, look after our door and all that sort of thing, one of the things we thought was that we needed to understand the context of the church first. So how old it was, its origins, its history, that began this whole massive journey.
And how did you come up with the idea of the Big Dig?
So Hamsterley Church, for people that don't know, St James's is about half a mile outside of the village. And for a long, long time, most of the villagers believed that the village used to extend to the church and it reduced in size over time. And that does happen, particularly where there's like plague villages where population numbers have greatly reduced and then suddenly the church ends up isolated. However, in local historians' writings, and they are literally just written into some old notebooks by one of the previous vicars, he related that the fields between the church and the village are known as the Shith fields or She fields, spelled S-H-I-T-H. That relates to the idea of banshees, the screaming sort of souls from round barrows. In Scotland, I think they're believed to be quite negative and drawing people to their death. In Ireland, they are warning people of death. So basically, it sort of indicated that there might be this gap between the village and the church has always existed. So I set about looking at evidence for any settlement and couldn't. So then put together a briefing paper, I suppose, for lack of better terminology, as I'm not a professional archaeologist, and badgered lots and lots of people, as Jackie, you know, because I think you were one of the people I badgered.
Yes, I remember coming up one winter's day to have a look around this beautiful church. I mean, like it wasn't a chore to come out and have a look. Hamsterley is absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's well worth looking into. I mean, this building itself is just amazing, just absolutely lovely. And it's about the 11th century, was I reading?
So the church was dedicated in 1180.
Right.
Peter Ryder, who's a well-known church archaeological historian, believes that probably the nave of the church is pre-conquest.
Right.
So eventually, after knocking on lots of doors, I managed to knock on the door of David Petts, who at that time was involved with the project of Belief in the Northeast. And I explained what we were trying to do. And David provided some funding to do some archaeological geophys around the church to try and see if there was any evidence of settlement. And what was great was that was our first involvement of people from the community. So we had people that came out from Durham Archaeological Services and had the patience to take us through how to use the geophysical machines. In the briefings, nobody told us that we weren't to wear metal things.
Oh, no.
So although one of the machines we had to go, none of the results could be used.
Oh.
Because we didn't quite, even a belt buckle isn't allowed, is it?
That's right, yeah.
And Durham Archaeological Services were very perplexed at telling me that they had found really nothing, but I was delighted that they found nothing.
Yeah.
And through doing that, we kept reporting back to the local village. We got lots and lots of interest, to the point that at the last sort of evening that we had 50 people here in the church coming to hear about sort of some of the latest history. And that then prompted the idea that we need to try and find out the history of the village. Hamsterley as a village is absent from loads of the written texts.
I must admit, I've done a little bit of research myself, sort of trying to in preparation for coming here. And you're right, there is very little to be found. When you start looking, one of the major websites for information is Keys to the Past.
Yeah.
And even then, there's one page that talks about a bit of Neolithic flint found more down near Hamsterley Forest. Something else. An arrowhead that I was reading about. But apart from that, I couldn't really find anything much more about Hamsterley, other than it has a disconnected church from its congregation.
Yeah, and we don't appear in the Bolden Book, but there are quite a lot of places in the sort of Teesdale, because we are actually in Teesdale, that don't appear in the Bolden Book, and also it depended on the ownership. But also we don't appear in the Bishop Hatfield survey.
Right.
Whereas our neighbour, Witton the Weir, doesn't appear in the Bolden Book, but they reappear in the Hatfield survey.
So we've sort of the community side of the archaeology. Would you say that it was kind of 50-50 with the professionals then, that it was that you took your work to them and they helped you, or did they lead you to do what you're doing?
So I think when David Petts got involved with the Belief in the Northeast and helped us do the geophysical survey, he saw the amount of interest from the local village.
Right.
And it was him that said, have you thought of doing a big community dig?
Right.
Because it's a great way to get other people involved. You could see it as an opportunity to try and find out information about the village. You know, this is all very new for us, new for me. I'm not an archaeologist, and so some of it isn't going to be exact, precise techniques. I'm aware of that. But some of it was about actually beginning to engage people with where they live.
Yeah, I was reading a paper this morning, actually, about community archaeology. And what it said was that community digs connect people to the archaeology, but they also connect people to the community. Do you think that's something that's happened during this process?
Yeah, because I put out the call for people, and they sort of expressed their interest. And there were some people who couldn't dig their gardens, for example, that were very happy for people to come into their gardens and dig.
Yeah.
Now, some of those people that went into those people's gardens, those people didn't know. And some of the people that were put digging the same pit didn't really know each other, even though we were in a village.
Yeah, yeah.
But they then spent 2 days sat alongside each other digging. And actually, one of the things that people have come up and said afterwards is what a great opportunity it was just to spend time with somebody in a completely different environment, to learn about that. One of the gardens where it's happened, the owner and the two people that were digging their garden have already re-met.
Oh, really?
Since that. And they've got their own little WhatsApp group between the three of them. And they got on like a house on fire, and they didn't know each other.
Right.
In advance of that.
Yeah. And what about help from outside the community? Did people come forward?
Yeah. And it was really, really lovely that happened. So there were some people who were just interested in archaeology, wanting to get involved in some sort of dig. But we also then had people that were associated with Hamsterley or from the past. So some of their families were from Hamsterley. And although they're not living here now, they wanted to come in and do that. What was also nice was that there were some people involved who are relatively newly moved into the village, and there are people that are born and bred from families that have existed here forever.
Yeah.
And it was great to also hear them, the people who had lived here for a long time, sharing their information to the other people.
Yeah. So on like the morning of the first day, were you a bit anxious who was going to turn up? And
completely, utterly. And we had somebody that was children were poorly, somebody else that had to pull out. And I was like, oh no, this is not going to have enough pits to dig. And this is going to be embarrassing. And all these students going to arrive from Durham University and I'm going to look like a right idiot.
Oh, of course, because David brought some people with him, didn't he?
We had a fantastic number of students that came to us, including undergraduates and postgrads. Very enthusiastic, great with the people in the village, which was really lovely. But then I was like getting really embarrassed that, oh no. And then I was like, have we got all the right equipment? And then as soon as I arrived, somebody went, have you got string? And I went, no. I was like, oh no. There was just so much to think about.
Oh, dear me. But it's about like equipment and everything. A lot of people had their own, didn't they? Because they were doing their own gardens. So a lot of people had some tape measures and spades and things. And
they did.
Yeah.
And
it was helpful, I suppose.
And David borrowed a lot from Durham Archaeological Services. So came with the special trowel.
Oh, yes, of course.
The
yes.
4-inch trowel. Why it has to be 4-inch, I don't know, but the 4-inch trowel. And, I had tarpaulin and David also brought some mattocks as well.
Yes, yeah. Oh, absolute necessity. But one thing I noticed coming back into the village today was I was looking at some of the spots where the test pits had been dug, and you can't tell.
Well, prior to the event, David had sent me a picture of a previous dig, which I had to circulate, showing where somebody had done a test pit to say, don't do this on immaculate lawn because, you can't return it to what it is.
Yeah.
I think we've done really well.
I was going to say, I think Hamsterley took up the challenge and said, do you know what? We will put it back how it was.
Yeah.
I mean, Hamsterley, if you drive through Hamsterley, everyone's garden is beautiful. They're all covered in flowers and immaculate, beautiful lawns. And that's exactly what it looks like now. It's like nothing happened.
It's, bizarre. Although several people had to dig another hole to put the rest of what they couldn't fit back in.
It never seems to go. Yeah.
Which is quite odd.
Yeah. So did you have, was it 21 pits open during the 2 days?
We didn't have 21 pits open, but in advance, David Pett said have a number of pits that could be used. So actually, we only dug 16.
Right.
Some of those bottomed out because one of the things that we discovered was that Hamsterley's bedrock, although I've been told not to call it bedrock,
right,
by some people because it's I don't understand, it's glacial deposits or
right.
something.
Oh, right, okay.
Is only 40 to 50 centimetres below the surface.
Right, and you were aiming to dig
a
little bit further than that.
Well, you dig until there's no evidence of human activity or you hit bedrock.
Yeah. The archaeologists like to call the natural.
The natural, yes.
The natural.
So a number of the pits bottomed out quite quickly with not a lot in them.
Yeah.
One of the pits sort of was dug and they were only available for 1 day, so they didn't get all the way down and then filled it in, which is a real shame.
Oh.
And there was one pit that was dug that when they saw all the sort of instructions, they didn't want to do that. So they just did their own pit in the garden with their children, but didn't have any involvement of anybody. So we've unfortunately not had any, we can't record anything from it.
Right.
But it just, the paperwork put them off.
Right. Oh, fair enough. And the thing is, that's the one thing that probably is the most important thing is to write up the evidence, because then you can start putting it with other context sheets and then you can start building up a picture of what's happening. And without that written evidence documentation, it's kind of lost. But if that's only one, it's not the end of the world, is it?
No, and also I would say, they did that with their children and it was a great little exercise for them. And do you know what? That's fine. It's great.
Yeah. And I mean, getting the younger people involved in some archaeology, it's fun, isn't it? It's
well, one of the houses ended up with 7 children around their pit.
I do believe I visited that one. There's a lot of sieving going on.
Which is great.
I think there was a lot of sieving going on, and a lot of people. It was a real community spirit feel when we went to that garden to talk to people, because everybody was mucking in and just everyone was around this metre square, soil everywhere, enjoying themselves, and had 3 or 4 sieves on the go. So I mean, they were very finely going through all of the soil. But yeah, it was nice. It was a nice garden to go and visit. The next one we visited actually had some help from a sheep.
Oh,
so that was quite nice. There was chickens helping, scratching, and there was a sheep that came in and thought it would come and have a little nosy, see what was happening. And that was, that was interesting.
And it's like, and my dog rolled over into mine as well.
Right.
Yeah, so just
it's
stretched.
Nice cool earth.
But and I believe there's 4 of the children who are involved want to try and get involved in the young archaeology and stuff, which is just fab.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, maybe we can have a chat about that later. I've had some ideas on that.
Oh, you see.
So all the digs were happening. The day was moving on, and come sort of 4 o'clock packing up time, I, like you, headed back to the village hall to find a lot of finds processing that had been going on throughout the day.
Yeah.
So who were all the ladies who were helping out doing the finds processing?
And gents.
And always, right. I only saw a couple of ladies, so
Yeah.
I couldn't. Yeah.
So there were a number of. What was really nice was that there were a number of people who couldn't be on the ground or didn't have the physical ability to dig, but wanted to be involved. And I thought, there is the possibility of washing your finds next to your where you're digging your pit, and therefore you're processing as you go.
Yeah.
But rather than do that so that we could have other people involved, we created like a hub in our village hall, and the people that were in that situation came together. They got instruction from David Petts about how to wash things, how to catalogue them, make sure they're labelled, and they just sort of kept having load after load arriving during the day. I did forewarn them as they experienced that would just keep on increasing, and indeed on the Sunday they were swamped with quite a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But also the people digging, initially you weren't quite sure what to save. So I think their first batch, they just got loads of rocks and things that weren't tooled at all. And they were just like...
Actually, there was a few more exciting things came out of the ground, wasn't there? Some dateable pottery, I think, some nice bits of blue and white.
Yes.
And some salt glazed pottery, so a bit more rougher sort of farm kitchenware kind of thing, which is interesting, to find out what was on the tables, the houses in Hamsterley, maybe 100, 200 years ago.
Yeah, and some of the datable medieval pottery is maybe thought to be 12th, 11th century, so very early.
Yeah.
There's also some little carved stone and maybe a worked stone, like a sharpening stone.
Right. Oh, so this has come out since I had a look, so I wasn't aware of these things. I think I saw a couple of little pieces of green glazed medieval pottery, but not a great deal. This must have come out, like I say, a little bit later on.
Yeah, it's just right at the sort of end, as is always the case, isn't it?
Yeah.
But also there were things like, little skeletons of chickens.
Oh, nice.
One of the gardens she's an artist, and actually about 30 centimetres down they found one of her old paint tubes.
Oh, nice.
So goodness knows how it ended up 30 centimetres down. But it does give you a little snapshot into the life of people. Ironically, my pit, I think, was by somebody who was obsessively clean, because there was nothing in it apart from rubble. Not a sausage. But it's great. And one of the people, actually, the house where their pit was being dug, his parents and his grandparents had all lived in that house. So there were some of the things coming out that he could relate to, because he remembered them.
Yeah. Oh, goodness.
Which is like...
Yeah. That's quite nice, isn't it? Yeah. So the second day, you moved on to more public spaces in the village.
Yeah. And I think probably if I was doing this again, I'd probably done more of a mix on the first day, because I think it was quite nice having some public spaces that people could see, because a lot of them on the first day was in people's back gardens, for example.
Yeah.
And so if you came through the village, you wouldn't really have seen a lot.
Yeah.
And I think we could have perhaps done a mix, and that might have been more useful. So so that people could wander around and have a look. Although we did have one in the pub garden on the first day.
Yeah. I mean, maybe one of the things that comes out of doing something is you learn a few things that you think, like you said, that you maybe do a little bit differently, and maybe to get a little bit more notice might be to set up like a gazebo maybe on the village green, with maybe a bit of finds processing going on outside, for, like you say, because I know some people did come through the village to come and have a look, didn't they, on the Sunday?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, it was quite nice.
But we chose some areas on the village green. We had to get permission to dig the village greens, but we chose some areas where we believe there may have been previous buildings. And one of them was next to a stone locally that's known as the coffin resting stone. Now, coffin resting stones were often used when people were transporting the coffins from some distance to the church that served a big area. And obviously it's heavy, and they would rest it on the stone.
And do we think it still is a coffin resting stone now, after a bit of archaeology?
Well, what was really lovely was it was a fantastic example of archaeology plus talking to people, because when they dug down by the side of the coffin resting stone, it initially looked like it was on a bed of pebble, but then when they re-looked at it, actually it looks like it was probably a stone that had been transported here with the Ice Age, and it was just led on morainic deposits.
Right.
It then turns out that actually it was outside what was formerly a carpenter's shop, and the carpenter used to make coffin. And so he probably just went, this is a really handy stone. I'll just move it to here.
Right.
And I'll use it to make me coffins on. So it was a coffin resting stone in a way, but not the coffin resting stone that not one that had a body in.
Right.
It was 3-body coffin. So we wouldn't have found that out, actually, if we hadn't been digging there and then other people who'd grown up in the village. It was actually 2 people's information that got put together to get that.
Yeah. And this is another thing about the community coming together, doing something and talking, where these people probably wouldn't have never had that conversation.
No.
They would have never been together to have that. And that's come out, and it's something really useful, and it actually gives credence to the name now, that something that everybody knew, but nobody knew why it was called that. They just assumed.
Yeah.
And now there's a factual thing that you can attach to it now.
And like at the end of first day where I was digging my pit, then my opposite neighbour came over because I was digging over former cottages that were in front of my house. And my opposite neighbour came over and went, why are you digging there? That's the old coal house. They lived in that end of the house, not that end. I was like, serves me right.
Yeah. Did you find any coal?
We did find coal, yes. There was a layer.
So you've proved something.
Yeah, we were digging in the coal. But it was really interesting. Where actually, probably one of the things that will come from this, and it's already started happening naturally, people have started writing articles for the parish magazine about their experiences as children growing up.
Right.
So they've just started recounting stuff and submitting stuff. And what happened with the Big Dig thing is it started those further conversations, and somehow there's a really good sort of oral history there that needs to be recorded.
Yeah.
And that can form part of the archaeological process.
Yeah. What a good idea. And I have heard of that happening in mining communities. You know, people recording their history and their recollections, and, you know, time spent with their grandparents and putting those documents together, putting that information together.
Yeah, and what's sort of quite unusual about Hamsterley in a way is that because our bedrock's so shallow, although we're surrounded by areas that were involved with mining, Hamsterley was always agricultural.
Right.
And quite often the agricultural history gets lost in those mining communities because that's the predominant sort of employer.
Yeah.
Whereas Hamsterley has always been farming.
Yeah. Which is one of the things that came out in your geophysical survey, isn't it? That the ridge and furrow came up quite nicely, didn't it?
Yeah.
And the old strip farming, the more wonky, should we say, a ridge and furrow as opposed to the very neat.
Yeah.
And you could kind of date the farming techniques by making a comparison between the two.
Very obviously. And as you said, a lot of the houses within the village have the old remnants of the massive strips behind them.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that's come out of the Big Dig has been linked with knowledgeable professionals.
Yeah.
So one of the professionals have been linked with was also feeling that we've got like old terrace, sort of Iron Age, probably cultivation terraces as well. So that, you know, our agricultural history has gone back years.
Yeah.
And Hamsterley did at some point come back into textual histories because Hamsterley as a village was known as one of the key growers of potatoes not long after they got introduced in Elizabethan times.
Yeah. I did hear something about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, about the potatoes and
quite why, I don't know.
Hamsterley on the map.
Yay, for potato growing.
So looking at everything that's been collected, all the finds and everything, they're going to be looked at by Durham University and what's going to happen with those things?
I mean, the bit I've learned from this is there's actually quite a lot to do before it's even gone to that stage.
Right.
Because in 2 days we didn't manage to get everything dry, and you can't store things wet.
Right.
So I am still drying stuff out.
Oh, right.
Still collating everybody's papers, making sure that we've got everything recorded correctly. What's been quite interesting is how people interpret instructions and trying to sort of suss out and make sure that there's a consistency between them.
Right.
Otherwise, again, the information ends up pretty, you can't really use it. So there's all that to do before it even goes to Durham University to be sort of reviewed and analysed. And then the idea is that David Petts is going to come back and do an evening for the village, taking us through a more detailed description of what's been found and what it means in terms of the development of the village, and if we can tell anything from it.
Yeah.
I think inevitably one of the things is you are digging 16 pits in a village.
Yeah.
And if you hit something, yay.
Yeah.
If you don't hit anything.
So with that in mind, are you going to do another dig?
I think one of the things we were looking for is to have a group of people who have now had the experience of doing it, who we could then get involved in doing something else in another location.
Oh, right. Okay.
And
is that a secret at the moment? Or?
No, not necessarily.
Right.
There are a number of potential other locations to do with the landscape archaeology in and around Hamsterley that might warrant further investigation. And me and you, Jackie, we've talked about the notion of field walking as well at times, which can, generate some really good information. That's quite hard when you don't know what on earth you're looking for.
Right.
Now that we've had our heads down a pit for 2 days.
Yeah. People are used to looking at old broken bits of ceramic and kind of know what they look like when they're dirty in the ground.
It sounds daft, but you have to. I know, 2 days does not make an expert by any means, but it just means I would feel a bit better in terms of if I was doing that, knowing what I was looking for a bit more.
Yeah.
So that process of field walking becomes more useful and more. People aren't just picking random stones. That's the other thing.
So do you think Hamsterley's archaeology is it's set to stay now? Do you think this is something that's going to continue as a project? Maybe like not necessarily every year, but there will be aspects of archaeology happening and information going out to people from now on. Yeah.
So during the summer, we open the church once a month. And we do sort of tours of the church about the history of the church, because there's some unique, I know that word's used a lot, but unique features of Hamsterley Church that aren't found anywhere else, as far as we know, in the UK. We're going to be applying for funding to have another load of geophys done on some particular areas. Like I said, one of the links we've made from the Big Dig with one of the professionals seems to be very hopeful, and they're very, very keen to get involved, and we need to reach out to some of the other local archaeological groups. The Belief in the Northeast project linked us up with Thought Fuels.
Oh yes, yeah.
I don't know, is that how you say it? Thought Fuelers or Thought Fuel?
Yeah, Thought Fuels.
And they're very keen to come over here, and we're keen to go over there to try and make links, because they've done a lot of the church survey, but like the graffiti recording,
that's right, yeah,
which we haven't done.
Yeah. Oh, you've not done that yet?
Nope.
Oh, right. Oh, that's another fun task.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. And it's amazing what naughty choir boys get up to.
And somebody is researching into, because we had war graves in here that were exhumed and moved. So somebody's done research into that. And for Remembrance Day, there's a talk in here about those people and their history, and Hamsterley Forest was used to house prisoners of war for a time. And indeed, during the archaeological, the Big Dig, one of the pieces of tree graffiti that was recorded was from a prisoner of war, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which I didn't know about, and that was fascinating. And then we've got some other sites that we want to sort of, ones that have already been geophys, where we're thinking of doing that field walking, and we've also awaiting carbon date on our church door.
Right. What will that tell you? What's carbon dating?
So carbon dating is where you're asking really technical things.
It's just for people who don't know what carbon dating is.
So we took a minute sample of the wood from the church door, and apparently the carbon that gets deposited within it at the time it's growing, they can remove that, test it and analyze it, and they can understand from that date that. But I think there's other information and other things happening that have spiraled on from that will mean that will happen sooner than that feedback.
Right.
I do definitely think there is a thing about recording this sort of oral information. I personally have been involved in something like that before.
Right.
And it was all done, although we're recording audio at the moment, I don't think it's a very successful way to record it because people never listen to it.
Right.
Again, you listen and it's really then hard to find information back once you've listened to them.
Right.
So I want to do something where I'm always one for going with how people are sort of leading it.
Yeah.
And because people are now sending stuff into the village magazine, naturally, go with it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was thinking of like trying to encourage more and more, and even putting out some questions to sort of get people to answer, to jog their memories and things like that, to try and build up a bank of information. And none of this stuff is useful unless it's made available.
Yeah.
So one of the other things I want to do is pull all the research that we've got, not only from this project, but geophys stuff, which is available on the what's it called? The council one.
The keys to the past.
The records, archaeological records thing.
Right. I can't think.
What's she called? She's at the Belief in the North East.
The Historic Environment Record.
Yeah. So our geophys is available on the Historic Environmental Record system, but also we've got loads of documents that we want to make available generally. So we've got a record of all the graves in our 3 churches, can you believe, in our one village?
Yeah.
And we've already done lots of research into various people and poets and people that have lived in the village and stuff like that, and just begin to build up this massive bank of information that people can research.
Oh, you're going to have to write a book.
Oh. When do you have time to do stuff like that?
Well, all this information, I mean, you're definitely going to have to build a website.
Yeah.
A Hamsterley website where, where this can all be made available for future generations.
I hope so. That's the idea. And, I know when I'm researching it's really useful to come across stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's really helpful.
Yeah. And what about video? Do you think you might do some video, for some of these interviews with people, about the village?
If only I knew somebody who's really good at doing like recording and videos of things and sort of documenting histories.
Well, maybe with a bit more tech training.
But no, I think videos are always a good way to involve people. And, and I think there's some stuff we can do with the school. I'd love to do some direct stuff with the school because the Big Dig was on the weekend. So it was quite hard for the school to get involved.
Yeah.
And I would like to get them involved in something because I think it sounds naff, doesn't it? But I remember as a kid watching Time Team and getting obsessed with it and just loving it.
Yeah.
And that's what got me into this whole thing. And, it'd be fab to inspire more young people.
Yeah. Well, Ady Davis, thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you.
We'll be back next time with more Tales from the Trowel. Make sure you like, follow and subscribe from wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Tales from the Trowel, an Archaeology News Northeast production in association with Bitmatic Productions.